Muy buenas tardes con todos. Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros el día de hoy. Tenemos un webinar muy especial planeado para ustedes. Estamos hoy día con EducationUSA y con Georgetown University, McCourt School of Public Policy, y vamos a conversar de estrategias para tener una aplicación competitiva a nivel posgrado en los Estados Unidos. También quiero mencionar que con esta institución tenemos un convenio que es de muy buena oportunidad con Colfuturo para los beneficiarios del programa Crédito Beca, y es una beca de mínimo $15,000 por semestre, y esta puede ser renovada para el siguiente año de estudio. Para aplicar el programa de crédito beca, les recuerdo que tienen que postularse a la convocatoria. Esta abre el 10 de enero, cierra el 28 de febrero y los resultados salen el 11 de mayo. El webinar va a durar aproximadamente 40 minutos, capaz un poquito más. Tendremos una sección para preguntas al final. Entonces, mientras todos dan su presentación, por favor, manden sus preguntas. Con mucho gusto, al final vamos a contestar cada una de ellas. El día de hoy estamos con Lindsay, estamos con Miguel, que es un estudiante colombiano en esta institución. Lindsay, thank you so much for being here today. We are really excited to hear your presentation. And without further ado, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm Lindsay Munson. I am the Associate Director of Admissions for Georgetown University's McCourt School of Public Policy. We are located in Washington, D.C. I want to, first of all, thank our partners at EducationUSA and Miguel Otero for helping us put this presentation on. And thank you to our alumni, Miguel, who you'll hear from in a little bit. But today, I'm just going to keep this session pretty general in order to provide tips for individuals that are interested in applying to graduate school in the U.S. So I'm going to go over a few elements that you can expect most graduate school applications to require. I'll give some general application tips from an admissions perspective, and then in my portion of the presentation, talking about McCourt and our specific graduate programs, kind of briefly a high-level overview. And then we have one of our alumni, Miguel, here tonight, who will share about his experience as an international graduate student as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. So we'll kind of go over each one of these things, but these are typical application elements that you'll see as requirements for most U.S. graduate schools. So typically they'll require a statement of purpose. We call ours like the academic statement. A resume or work experience or CV is typically required. Standardized test scores. There is a trend of making most of the test scores optional. So some schools don't require that anymore. The McCourt School, Georgetown, we do. So I'll go over that in more detail. Most schools require letters of recommendation. And then, as I mentioned, I'll give some general tips towards the end of the presentation. So we'll kind of first dive a little bit more into the statement of purpose or academic statement. So some of these tips may seem a little obvious, but you will be surprised what we see when we're reviewing applications from the admissions committee's perspective. So what I'll also, a general recommendation would be to, when you're applying to any program, to actually visit their website. So all graduate school programs have different application requirements, different deadlines, what they're looking for. So it's really important that you review the website of each school or program, and maybe even speak with the admissions team to make sure you have a good understanding of kind of what the requirements are and what they're looking for. So for example, we at the McCourt School have 4 different graduate programs. And so for each of them, there's a different prompt that will ask students to address in their statement of purpose or academic statement. So it's really important to follow directions, answer the question that the program is looking for, and try to be as specific and tailor the statement to the program or the school that you're applying for. Try not to use the same statement for multiple schools. So we've seen, people by mistake also, if they're submitting a statement to our school, the McCourt School at Georgetown, they may accidentally write George Washington in their statement. So make sure you proofread it and possibly have 1 or 2 other people proofread the statement before you submit it. After you've written it, it's helpful to take a look at it and think about how your statement might read from the perspective of like a faculty member or an admissions representative. A lot of times, it sounds like the the person that's written the academic statement is a good candidate. But a question sometimes that, you know, I might have still is, why is this person interested in our program specifically? And so making sure that you've kind of done your research on the program and the school that you're applying to so you can articulate why it's a good fit for you and what about that program specifically you feel like you can gain, what skills, what experience that program can offer you to reach whatever kind of general career goals you have moving forward. So basically stating your motivation for applying. And so a lot of times what we look for from the McCourt School is really a good fit. You know, not only do we think you're a good fit for us, but you think that we're a good fit for you, and you can articulate that well in the academic statement or statement of purpose. The next element that I wanted to talk about was the resume or CV. So this is just kind of listing your education and professional experience. For those of you that are not sure what a US resume structure looks like, it's probably pretty easy to find with a quick Google search. So lots of examples online, but typically what we see and what we recommend is trying to keep it to 1 to 2 pages if possible. We're reading a lot of applications, so kind of having something that is easy to look at and the information is succinct is really helpful from the admissions perspective. Typically, they're listed chronologically, the work experience and professional experience. So having the most recent at the top of the resume, and then including your educational history as well. So there typically can be 2 ways to go about this. If somebody's been out of school for a while, they may start with their professional experience in chronological order with the most recent at the top and end with the educational history. If they're kind of more close to completing their undergraduate degree, they may start with their educational history. If you don't feel like you have much work experience, postgraduate work experience specifically, there's probably a lot of experience that you have within your undergrad experience or in your personal extracurricular experience that you can highlight. So you can include internships, volunteer experience. You can talk about extracurricular opportunities that you got involved with, including significant honors and awards. We really do look for a lot of leadership experience and potential. So any kind of leadership position that you held, I think is really important to highlight as well. A really big concern for a lot of applicants, we get a lot of questions about standardized test scores. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there is a trend where some schools are moving to make standardized test scores optional. At the McCourt School, we still do require it. So again, I think it's really important to make sure that you are reading the requirements for each program that you're looking for to see like what tests and if they even require it. I think some things to look for each program is to be aware of any minimum requirements that they might have. Some schools require a minimum or they have numerical cutoffs. Some do not. So it's good to kind of know what those are. So when you're preparing, maybe studying for the test, you kind of know what range you need to aim for. Allowing time to prepare for the test and to have the official score reports sent is also important to keep in mind. So like I mentioned, it's good to study for the test if you are going to take it. So making sure you're knowing what the application deadlines are for the programs that you're applying for and kind of working backwards to make sure you're giving enough time to prepare for the test, sit for the test, and then to have the official score reports sent to the school. We can't review the application until we have the official score reports. So making sure that you're keeping that in mind. There are different kinds of tests that different programs look for. So the test that most of our public policy students are taking is the GRE exam. So that's a general record exam. And that's really what a lot of most graduate programs accept. There's also the GMAT, which is a general management test. So that is typically for applicants that are applying for business school. So an MBA. There's the LSAT, the LSAT, which is for law school applications, and then the MCAT, which is for medical school. We will, at the McCourt School, we see generally the GRE being submitted for most of our programs, but we also accept the GMAT or LSAT. And I know that like our law school and our business school, you know, typically the test that is the most popular is the GMAT for business school and LSAT for the law school, but they also accept the GRE. So just making sure you kind of know what your options are and before signing up for the test and investing in that, because it also costs money to sit for the tests, and it's also a time commitment to prepare. If you're a non-native English speaker, most graduate programs do require you to also submit an English proficiency exam. For us, we will accept the TOEFL and IELTS. Those tend to be the most common. Again, also checking with each program or school to be aware of recommended requirements and also minimum requirements. So at the McCourt School, we require, or we recommend, at least a 100 in the TOEFL with a 22 in each section, and then a 7.0 in the IELTS, just to give you some reference there. And then letters of recommendation. So each program requires a different amount of letters of recommendation. Our programs require 3. I know our Georgetown's law program only requires 1. So it varies. So again, important to pay attention. I also suggest sticking to the required number. I think a lot of people are very eager and want to go above and beyond. And I get a lot of questions about, is it okay to submit more than what the requirement is? And my general advice is to stick to the required number. You know, the admissions committee puts the requirements together very thoughtfully. And so if they're requiring 3, they typically only need to see 3. So we're also, again, reviewing a large number of application materials. So adding more than the required amount it's not helpful from our end. So, you know, we're kind of just trying to look at the information that we need to make the best decision that we can. So sticking to the required number is something I would suggest. It's good to identify your recommenders and then also talk to them early to request if they're willing to write a letter for you. So kind of thinking ahead of the deadline, giving them ample time to write the letter for you and get it in by the deadline that you're asking them to. Don't wait till the last minute. It's possible they might be writing letters of recommendation for other people, or, you know, they have careers and projects that they're working on too. So just giving them enough time so they can make sure that they have the capacity to write a strong letter for you. It's helpful too to share your goals with your recommenders. So talking to your recommenders about the programs that you're applying to and what your goals are, so the letters that they write can be specific. You can share a copy of your resume and also kind of discuss and make sure you're giving information to the recommender about the information that you'd like them to include. So there's sometimes different programs and different schools look for different formats of letters. So it could be just a free-form letter, or it could be specific questions that they're asking recommenders to answer. So making sure you're kind of also doing your research so you can prepare your recommenders on what they should expect. We get a lot of questions on who should I choose to write the letter of recommendation. My general advice is to select people that know you the best, have worked really closely with you, and can speak to your specific abilities and how they think that you would contribute to our program. So typically for us, we recommend at least 1 academic and professional. That's not really a hard requirement. If you have, you know, you've been out of school for a while and you think that your strongest letters of recommendation would come from professionals, that's totally fine. It's really, at the end of the day, we just want to know and hear from the people that know you the best and can speak to your abilities. You could ask a coach, a mentor, somebody that you volunteered with as well, or some other ideas of good people to think about. We get a lot of questions of people that maybe they work in an organization where there's a high profile name that they've interacted with kind of, you know, minimally, but this person is aware that they work for them, but they don't really work very closely, but they're a recognizable figure. And they'll ask if that's something that would look favorably on their application. And our feedback for that question is, if we'd rather have somebody that we're not familiar with, we don't recognize the name, that can give us a more detailed and specific letter than kind of a form letter from somebody that is very well known. So again, just picking people that really know you the best and have worked with you closely. And just finally, some general tips. I think I've kind of touched on a lot of these in each of the slides. Making sure that you're checking the requirements and deadlines for each program that you're applying to, being aware of basic requirements of some programs. Like some programs have prerequisites. It could be work experience or courses. So making sure that you are aware of those, and if you have to have them before you apply, or if you could receive a conditional admission, meaning you can apply without it, and if admitted, you have to fulfill the requirement before starting the program. Those are good to keep in mind. Pay attention to the deadlines. We have, for example, the McCourt School has 3 different deadlines. They're all equally competitive for admissions consideration, but 2 of our earlier deadlines are if you want to be considered for merit-based scholarships. So just making sure you're aware of the differences in certain deadlines. We don't do rolling admissions, but some schools do rolling admissions, where the earlier you get your application in, the more competitive it is. Others just do kind of deadlines where everybody applies by a certain deadline, and then everyone's reviewed, and then decisions are rendered by a certain date. So just kind of being aware of, the different deadlines and which one you'd like to apply for, and making sure that you're meeting the ones that either are to your advantage for admission or for scholarship. Not all programs require interviews, but some do. If there are interviews that are required, making sure you're kind of looking out for those invitations to schedule the interviews, making sure you're prepared, you've researched the program, you've maybe researched the person that you're going to be interviewing with, and have your own questions prepared. So again, we are, obviously interested in learning as much about the applicants, but it's also helpful when the applicant seems eager to learn more about the program and seems genuinely interested and has done their research. So I think coming prepared with questions really makes a good impression. Some programs require like supplemental information. So we have an optional statement that you can use to address any additional personal information you didn't feel like you were able to include in your academic statement. We have the option for you to waive the GRE. So if you decide to do that, we'll ask for supplemental information about your quantitative background, just because that's helpful for us for the specific programs that we feel like we need that information for. So, there's various additional application requirements other than the general elements that I've outlined in this presentation. So just making sure you're aware of that. Again, don't wait to the last minute. I think giving yourself time to research the different programs so you kind of know what your options are. I would highly encourage you to reach out to admissions representatives to kind of get a feel for the culture of the school and the program, and have them maybe point out what they're looking for in applicants, and if there's anything that they feel like that would be helpful for you to know at the research phase, making sure that you know the deadlines and are kind of working backwards to make sure that you can get your transcripts in, your scores in, test scores in, recommendations, have time to write a good, strong academic statement. So giving yourself plenty of time to prepare your application. And then finally, again, proofread. Just proofread everything, your resume, your academic statement, everything that you're submitting, so you can make the best impression when you're submitting, an application to a graduate program. So those are just some general tips that we have. So I'll quickly discuss our McCourt School graduate program. So as I mentioned, we are located in Washington, D.C. We are a graduate program. We only have graduate programs. We don't have PhD options or an undergraduate program yet. So we have 4 graduate programs that are available for students to apply for. We have our Master of Public Policy, which is our flagship program, meaning it's our oldest and largest program. There's no work experience requirement for this program. Students on average come in with about maybe 2 to 3 years of professional experience, but we see candidates coming from undergrad, straight from undergrad, students with a couple years of non-policy related experience looking to pivot, and then also students that have some policy experience using the program to enhance their careers. It's offered on a full-time and a part-time basis. You can complete the program full-time in 2 years and part-time in 3 years. Our full-time class, we tend to try to enroll around 125 to 140 students each year. The part-time program cohort is about, I think, 20 to 25 students. We're pretty quantitatively rigorous for an MPP program. So we're, with all of our programs, we're all about, educating our students with the skills necessary to drive evidence-based policymaking decisions. So that's a pretty big emphasis in the curriculum. Our Master of International Development policy is a more specialized version of the MPP. So it has 2 additional core classes. All the core classes that are similar to the MPP, they have international development spin to them. So all the case studies and data sets are kind of focusing on the developing world. There is a 2-year postgraduate work experience requirement for this program. It is a very small cohort of about 25 students that enter each year, and it's only offered on a full-time basis, and you can complete it in 2 years. I'll jump down to our Master of Science in Data Science for Public Policy. This is our newest program at the McCourt School. It's really at the intersection of public policy and data science. I think we noticed there was a gap or a disconnect between computer science and data scientists, and then also public policy experts. So this is really kind of bringing the 2 disciplines together. Half of the core curriculum comes from the Master of Public Policy, and then half of the core curriculum comes from our data analytics program at Georgetown. So it is a 2-year full-time program. It is also a small cohort of about 25 to 30 students. So it's, again, only a full-time program. I think I mentioned that. But yeah, so, and then finally, our Master of Policy Management. This program we describe as our mid-career professional program. It does require 5 years of professional postgraduate experience. On average, our students tend to have 9 to 10. So how it differentiates from the MPP is it really takes kind of a 30,000-foot look at policy from the management leadership perspective, and trying to educate our students to be critical consumers of policy in order to implement effective projects and policies. It's not as in depth with the quantitative rigor of an MPP, where you would be a policy analysis producer, but you might be managing MPP students. So it's good to know what questions to ask, what data to gather, how to communicate about it, that sort of thing. So it is a 1 calendar year full-time program. You can also complete it on a part-time basis, and that can be completed in 2 calendar years. The cohort is typically around 70 students that come into that program. So that's a very unique network of students and peers that you would be plugged into that have a lot of really impressive professional experience coming and to join the Master of Policy Management cohort. When we talk about what sets the McCourt School apart maybe from other policy schools, we call it the McCourt Advantage. I would really, I mentioned kind of the curriculum in the previous slide. We really do have the quantitative and focus a lot on the quantitative skill building for our students to help drive evidence-based policy making decisions. So we think that's something that we do really well and sets our programs apart from other policy schools. Our community, I think if I've ever heard a student kind of talk about McCourt, they always highlight the community that we have, and it's very welcoming and collaborative and supportive versus being a competitive environment. I think that our students, we call them impatient change makers. They're very passionate and motivated, and they are very talented and have wonderful ideas. And so they kind of come in trying to hit the ground running, and then our faculty are super involved with the student body, and we have a wonderful support staff as well. So it's a very engaged community that we have at McCourt. Being in the Washington, D.C. area, which is kind of the policy center of the country. It gives our students a lot of opportunities outside the classroom to do internships, to gain real world policy experience. I think also just because we're in DC, we can, and we attract practitioners that come and teach our electives. We have a lot of our electives are held in the evening, so practitioners are practicing during the day and then coming to teach on campus at night. So, you know, I do think just our DC location has a lot of opportunities for our students, and that makes it unique. Being a part of Georgetown, the school has a very good reputation and is very well known. So we attract world-class faculty and policy experts to come teach our students. And then our alumni network is very loyal and have good reputations. And we have a pretty international student body. I think that it's about 40% international. So our students in the short term typically tend to stay in the DC area, but you know, after I think 6 months, students or even right after graduation, depending on kind of what their plan is, they could end up going back to their home countries and also home cities across the US. So we really have a very a global alumni network that you can tap into. So those are just a few highlights of what makes McCourt unique. And then I think that's, you know, I gave you guys a lot of information, so I think that's all that I had prepared for our presentation. But if you have other questions after this, here's our contact information. So McCourt Admissions at georgetown.edu, and then our website has a lot of information that you can take a look at. So I think I've talked enough. So I think that we're going more into the more interesting part of the presentation where we get to hear from Miguel. So I'm going to ask Miguel if he could go ahead and introduce himself, tell us what program he participated in, what he was doing before he joined our program, and kind of what he's up to now.
Sure. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Bianca, EducationUSA, and all the attendees for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about my graduate school experience. My name is Miguel Otero. I'm a Colombian recent graduate from the McCourt School of Public Policy from the NPP program. I graduated in the 2021 cohort, and currently I'm working in the International Monetary Fund as a research analyst. Before coming to McCourt, I studied in Bogota, economics and political science, a double major. And then I went to work in an economic policy think tank that is called FEDesarrollo, where I started to be deeply interested in economic policy and especially in macroeconomics. So that's what I've been working for the last couple of years. And well, I had always had in mind studying in the US due to its high level quality of education. Also, it made sense to me to come to DC. As Lindsay was saying, it's the center of the policy world in many ways. I also wanted to give it a chance and apply to jobs at different international organizations, multilaterals, such as the World Bank, the IMF, and of course, attend a high-level, high-quality program such as the McCourt School, which emphasizes in policy making from evidence-based policies. And in that sense, it gives you a lot of quantitative skills that not every program in the US or in the world does. And I'll be happy to talk a little bit about it.
Awesome. So yeah, I think a lot of our attendees on the call today are thinking about graduate school in the US. And do you have any advice that you might give to students as they're considering studying abroad, either at McCourt or other universities?
Sure. So first of all, I remember when I was applying to graduate school, I had these 3 or 4 different criteria. First of all, high quality of education. It wouldn't make sense to come to the US or to another part in the world to study if it's not a top tier university, that it's in the frontier of knowledge in many ways. because you know that we also have very good universities in our country. So if you want to apply, try to search what are the universities programs that are in the top 10, top 20 schools. That's the first criteria. Then the second criteria for me was, okay, we got to choose as well a place where you're going to be comfortable in many ways. Think that you're going to live in a city for 2 or 3 years, that the graduate experience is not only studying these 2 years that McCourt program took, but also then working was another part of the experience. And the US is a great place because normally you get a chance to work after you graduate from your programs. This is called the OPT. And currently, if I'm not wrong, Lindsay, the McCourt School have a 3-year OPT. So, and that depends on the program, but in my program, it's the MPP, it's a STEM program. So that's something you want to take advantage of. And that's part of the experience for sure. You want to also choose a place where the student body is diverse, the professors think that in many ways, not only hard skills or these quantitative skills are very important for your education, but also studying in a diverse environment where you have different ideas, you're exposed to different types of discussions, you will encounter students that are coming from different backgrounds. That's really important, especially if you want to be in the international development sector, as I do. If you then want to work in a multilateral, for example, you will see that at the World Bank, the IMF, the IDB, or any other places here in DC, you will find many people gathering from all over the world. So it's important to learn to discuss, to have different points of view in the table, and in a way to make good colleagues and good relationships with all the people. So in that sense, this was the second criteria. And then I would say another criteria for sure, it's trying to apply to a university that also offers good financial aid and that offers you the opportunity as well to work while you're studying. I personally got financial aid from the McCourt School, and then I had the opportunity to work at school as well as a research assistant for different professors. So that's something good because you would not only gain experience, but also in many ways work and try to, with that work, learn a lot, but also to pay some of the costs that implies living here in the US. So of course, this is difficult, isn't it? It's difficult to choose all the variables. There will be a trade-off, but again, the high quality of education is important, but also the city where you're going to live, the environment where you're going to be exposed, and then finally choose a program, a university that also helps you financially. That's very important.
Awesome. Those are great tips.
Those were really great tips. Thank you so much, Miguel. I'm sorry, Lindsay, you were going to say something.
No. Go ahead. If you guys have questions, feel free to jump in.
Well, we do have a question that, I mean, Lindsay, you can answer it, or maybe Miguel can answer it. We have a question about the average cost of living in a city like DC. I know a lot of people, you know, they have this on their radar. They don't know if they'll be able to afford it or how they can manage. So, Lindsay, if you want to tell us a little bit about it, and then Miguel, can you tell us a little bit about how you managed budgeting to live in a city like DC?
Sure. Yeah. And so I can actually share this, and this might be easier for folks to look at on our website. We kind of have the tuition outlined, and then also some general, and I'll put this in the chat too. And I don't know if you can share this, but this is from our website. So it kind of has our general tuition per credit hour, which for our program is around $50,000 per year. And then we also, I'm looking up the cost of living. We typically have, we have this outlined someplace, so I can do a little bit more research, but I don't know if Miguel, you have general feedback on kind of what your experience was.
Of course, I can step in.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think it's important to, and that's something you can do. It's a little bit hard. It will require time and discipline, but if you can study and as well try to find a job while you're studying, the McCourt School offers different RAs or graduate assistant positions. That's something you will want to aim for. Now, DC is a great city in many ways, not only because you have all this policy world around you, but because it is a relatively small city, easy to move around, to commute. Everything, at least for me, is walking distance, so I'll walk a lot or take a bike. And all the entertainment as well, and this is important for the cost of living. It's and by this I mean after times where you stop studying, you want to have other times for yourself. Well, DC offers a bunch of alternatives, such as all the museums that you have, for example, which are free museums, the Smithsonian museums, or you have different parks. You have the option to go hiking, biking. As a student, this was really important because you could entertain yourself in ways that are not very expensive, and that's something that you'll find in a city as DC. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that's great.
It does. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I was able to find the figures for our estimated living expenses. Sorry, I don't know those off the top of my head. But so for 9 months, the estimated living expenses, and this doesn't include like cost of tuition, is around $21,500 US. And then the 12-month estimated living expenses is around $26,100 US. So that's kind of just living expenses. So it's probably rent, food, transportation. It's just a general figure. So, and then I also think, there's different areas to live in DC.
Yeah.
You have roommates, there's all kinds of ways to kind of, there's a range of what that looks like for each individual.
Absolutely. Like that's such a, I feel like sometimes it's a little bit of a difficult question because like you said, there's so many ways of, saving money when you're living abroad, whether it's with roommates or you have like a family member. So every person has their different budgets, but Lindsay put that link in here. So if you guys want to go check that out, please feel free. Miguel, something that you mentioned that I just want to reiterate is the opportunity of being able to work on campus as a teaching assistant. There are opportunities. This would be on an F1 visa, which all of you would have to process after gaining admission. So I know the question of working and studying on campus comes up a lot. So just know that it is possible to do that. We also have some questions coming in through social media. And one of them is, what makes a strong candidate and what does Georgetown look for in students? Well, specifically McCourt, obviously. Lindsay, if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Of course, yeah. And so specifically McCourt, the admissions team, we take a very holistic approach when we review applications. So we look at everything that you submit. It's not just your GPA or what you scored on a standardized test. It's everything that you submit. So we don't use numerical cutoffs. We have averages that we see. So we do still require the GRE. On average, students tend to score a 160 in the verbal section, a 160 in the quant section, and a 4.2 in analytical writing. Average GPA tends to be a 3.5. But, again, with the holistic approach, for some of our programs, work experience is required, some is not, but work experience is always beneficial. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at leadership experience and potential. We're going to look really at your academic statement. And I think that's probably, in personal statement, some schools call it, is the most important piece of the application from our perspective, because that's really the only place that we get to hear from the student specifically about their motivations for applying. So what in their experience has kind of sparked their interest and passion for public policy? What has motivated them or made them decide to start applying for graduate schools at this point in their academic or professional career? And then what about the about McCourt, Georgetown, and the program specifically, do they think is going to help them, build the skills and experience they need to achieve whatever general career goals they have. So you don't have to have your 5-10-year plan. It's just kind of telling us, why, what's your why, why this program, why Georgetown, why now, basically, is kind of what we want to know.
Thank you so much. And then we have another question through social media. They are asking about application deadlines. Is it rolling admission, or do you have anything specific coming up for this new year?
Sure. Yeah. So for McCourt specifically, and this is different for each graduate program and school. So making sure, again, that you're kind of checking with each school specifically. But for us, we have 3 deadlines. Our first deadline is December 1, and that's what we call our early action deadline. We have a January 15th deadline, which we call priority deadline. And then we have a final deadline of March 1. They're all 3 equally competitive for admission. So full admissions consideration, the December 1 and January 15th, so the early action and priority deadline, those are if you want to be automatically considered for merit-based funding from our office. So applying by that basically indicates you're interested in being considered for scholarship funding. So the final deadline, we've typically distributed our scholarship funding by that point, so you're not automatically guaranteed to be considered. And then we don't do rolling admission. So the incentive, the only 2 differences between our first 2 deadlines is that the timing of the decision. So if you apply by the early action deadline of December 1, you'll get a decision by January 15th. And if you apply by January 15th, which is the priority deadline, you get a decision by, I think, mid-March, I believe. Yeah, mid-March. So it's kind of those, we're not rolling, it's more like batch decisions. So
thank you so much. And then we have another question about the TOEFL IELTS scores. We actually get this question a lot. If a student doesn't get the required score or is kind of just close to it, is there any possibility of having like a conditional admission and then they can take English courses at the university or any kind of support in that area?
So we don't really have like a minimum cutoffs. We have kind of our recommended, like we'd like to see a 100 with a 22 in each section. If it's off a little bit, we kind of can look at the rest of the application to see if we can gain a sense of their English capabilities that way. We might also request an interview with the student just to kind of, conversationally understand or get a better sense of their English capabilities. We personally don't do conditional admission for English proficiency. So it would be kind of what we determine at the time of application that we, think that they would be successful given their language abilities in our curriculum. But I do know there's some schools, like I know the law school, they would either say, okay, you have a really strong application. The only issue that we have is the only concern we have is the TOEFL score. So we're going to hold off on giving a decision for now. We're going to let you kind of go retake it. And if you can submit like a higher score, we can review your file again. So reconsider it. So there's different ways schools do it. Just ours is we don't do the conditional.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And then we have a question here. It's a little bit maybe directed towards another school. They're asking about master's degrees in biomedical sciences. I don't know if maybe you have like the catalog of all the programs maybe handy that we can put in here. And I know a lot of people joined the webinar for, information about successful applications, but there are a lot of people here from like other areas of study. But this is a really good question. They're asking about if their volunteer experience in research and in biochemistry would be, enough and would be a good quality to have in their resume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm actually going to put in, we have a graduate school of arts and sciences, and we have, I don't even know how many graduate programs we have. I can't even tell you, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And so there's some of the larger programs have specific admissions departments, like McCourt, the public policy school, has an admissions department dedicated to those programs. So the larger programs do, but the smaller programs, the graduate programs, are all kind of managed by our Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. So this lists all of the programs, and if you click on them, you can kind of go and see like their admissions requirements and what the contact information is. So those are good questions to ask specifically to the admissions representative for that program.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Well, it seems like we do not have any more questions through here or through social media. So I guess we'll end it here. A todos los que se conectaron, muchas gracias por estar aquí hoy. Les recuerdo, el beneficio que tenemos con esta institución es de una beca de mínimo $15,000 al año para los beneficiarios del programa Crédito Beca. Les recuerdo que para postularse a esta convocatoria abre el 10 de enero, cierra el 28 de febrero y los resultados salen el 11 de mayo. La verdad es una muy buena oportunidad. Si quieren leer más sobre el convenio, pueden entrar a colfuturo.org, luego hacer clic en programas, luego en programa Crédito Beca y estará toda la información del programa. Lindsay and Miguel, thank you so much for being here today. It was lovely hearing about, the programs at McCourt, and Miguel, such a good experience that you are having now. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. I hope everyone has a great night, and I'll see you guys at the next webinar.
Thank you.
Bye,
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Have a nice one.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.